Welcome back to Beyond the Conduit, and today marks 3 years since Xenoblade Chronicles 3 first released on Nintendo Switch, and that was July 29th, 2022. It's crazy that it's already been this long, and it feels like that was almost yesterday in many ways, especially, involving the series and where we are today and the discussion of it. But I think, today we kind of just want to look back on the game that was Xenoblade Chronicles 3 and still is.
Yeah, Xenoblade 3. It's funny that it's already been 3 years. That's actually, it was right after that game came out is when I applied to Final Weapon. Big era. Big era.
Big era.
But Xenoblade 3, it's a cap off of like this first Xenoblade saga. It's basically like Kingdom Hearts 3, but the entire Xeno series came out in almost the same time frame. Anyway, but it really is, supposed to be the end of an era. You see all these systems have built up and combined. Like, the game's premise itself is, the worlds of Xenoblade 1 and 2 have kind of been merged and mixed and matched and combined in many different ways. And, well, then, the DLC just capped off the cap off. So that's like definitively like the end of an era for Xenoblade, and it's a little sad but also exciting because we've already talked about some Xenoblade 4 predictions in the past, but today we're gonna just really dive into Xenoblade 3 and what it means to us, how we feel about it. We'll talk about all kinds of story and system stuff. So I think the best place to really jump off is, I don't know, what was going on and what was like your hype like for Xenoblade 3?
Dude, my hype was like through the roof because I feel like the thing that people failed, or not fail, but like people forget that the way that this game was introduced was insane, because the existence of this game was leaked from Jenna Coleman, who is Melia's voice actress, and she had said, she had briefly mentioned a new game in like a little like, I don't know, she had like a signing thing, a virtual signing thing, and some fan was like, "Oh, I love Melia, blah blah blah." I was asking her or something, and she's like, "Oh, I think we're doing another one." I was like, "Wait, what?"
You gotta love
and
the voice actor leak slips.
Yeah, it's like my two favorite voice actor slips of the recent memory. It's Jenna Coleman, and then it was Norman Reedus being like, "Oh, well, we're doing a second one." And then, like, 5 minutes later, Kojima posts a picture of him with a Walking Dead bat, with Negan's bat, with Reedus cowering.
Oh, man.
But, that's the thing that I found that so funny. And then they said that, this is in 2021, and there were rumors that the game was supposed to come out then, but it didn't happen. And then it finally got revealed at that next Direct, and it closed out the Direct. And I think it was the September Direct. It closed it out. Huge deal. And it was like, okay, what's going on here? And then that trailer had Melia and Nia in it, which totally confirmed the report that included Jenna Coleman and talked about like, yeah, this game's gonna merge the two worlds, which was crazy. And so, I was at a, all-time hype because I love both these games so much. And I was like, dude, thinking about like, oh my gosh, getting to explore all these areas, see these characters again, like I was super hyped. And then the Ouroboros stuff, I was getting some Xenogears vibes, I have to say. Definitely seeing some Xenogears throughout those first couple trailers, and really the lead up to launch, I somehow got really lucky. I managed to get a copy like 5 days before launch somehow. I have no idea how to this day.
No.
No, I swear I did. It was listed on eBay on like July 20th, and I bought it, and it came in on the 22nd or something like that. And so I had the game for like almost a week early, and so I had cleared the credits by the time that the game was out to the public. And I'm so glad I did that somehow, because I was like, no spoilers for me. I was just like, I cannot risk being spoiled on this game. But yeah, that was mainly my lead up to launch. But it's just a time I look back fondly on, just because like, the speculatory hype behind that game and everyone talking about it every day online was just a really fun time to be online.
Oh man, just like, especially like some of the like things that line up with Xenogears in those first few trailers, like people were going nuts on my timelines. Like the all kinds of like theory crafting that was absolutely insane. Just actually saying that Noah's gonna be like the actual like son of the main character of Xenogears and his lover. It's like, guys, Xenoblade's not that connected.
No,
But
dude, that was crazy. That was I remember people saying that, being like, yeah, no, like it's actually a direct continuation of Xenogears, and I was like, please stop, just please stop.
but like no, but like we would later see like the similarities with Xenogears. Like of course Noah has some design similarities, and then there's the two warring kingdoms that both start with the same letters. But we've discussed this before. Like this is all just Takahashi basically just continuing his ideas from Perfect Works. So it's not Xenogears, but it's definitely like this is just stuff that Takahashi's always actually wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
But man, at the time, like, dude, like, I'm still disappointed in myself for this, but Xenoblade 3 is the only Xenoblade game I don't own physically on Switch.
What?
Because I was so hype, but I didn't have reliable transportation at that time. So I just preloaded it. I just bought it right off the eShop.
Fair enough.
Because I also had a buddy who was getting it, and I also didn't want him to like. He went to like the midnight launch at GameStop though, I believe.
Back when those were a thing.
Yeah, but I'm like, oh wait, my time zone. If I buy it, I get it at 11 p.m. before midnight.
Mm-hmm. That's the way to do it, man. Central Time is elite.
So I just rolled with that. I have eyed like a few like $40 copies. I might just buy a box. I'm not sure, but I'll definitely have to get it physically. But I was just so hype. Like I'd sit and rewatch the trailers, sit and replay Xenoblade 2 some. Like that was just the build up to it. So like I just had like a formula every day after it came out. I'd get up, go to work, come home, do whatever I had to do, and then it's just Xenoblade until bed. And then weekends, nothing was separating me from my Switch for like those like couple weeks.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure you're the same. You're usually the same way. I'm not quite sure how you chug some of these million-hour games in like a week, Noah. Like I only have like that. I only have that in me like a couple times a year, but you manage to do it with every game.
Dude, it's a problem, and I call it like the review curse. Like you review so many of these games, it just happens. Like I remember when I reviewed Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, I had that game super early, and I was already done with it by the time the that State of Play came out. But I'd put 70 hours into it by that time.
Good lord. But we're both like the completionist types, so
I love me my platinums. Yeah, so I'll tell you, I checked my hours before this. I have 275 hours in Xenoblade 3. So I was checking my hours. I got like, and I'm not going to talk about my Xenoblade 2 hours, but I got 275 on 3, and then I've got 225 on 1.
I think I only have like in that 150 to 170 range on 3. 2 though, I'm just gonna out myself and be like, yeah, I have over 400 hours in it.
I was gonna say I have like 600 something hours.
And 1, I did play like the Wii U Virtual Console release, so I probably have about 250 spread across a couple save files. But like these games are huge, and Xenoblade 3 in particular, I'd say the only reason I don't have as much time in it as the others is because, well, look, it's only 3 years old. Xenoblade 2 is about to have like its 8th anniversary? So that's a lot more time for me to give it over 400 hours. But
yeah,
3 is also just a smooth and polished like experience in terms of like the menu and questing and exploration.
100%. No, I think that's the thing that I take away the most from with Xenoblade 3 is that it felt like, we've learned lessons from Xenoblade 1 and 2 and we've applied them all to this game. And it's very thematically relevant, right? Like the games of 1 and 2, the worlds of 1 and 2 have come together, but at the same time I feel like that the development lessons from both those games came together as well. And the result was kind of this, you know, I want to say like mix and mash, but that's not a bad thing when I say that. But like it's a mix and mash product that took lessons from all over the Xeno series and put them into one and created a very memorable game. I think that the big thing for me that was obviously first time in the history of the series was there were essentially two protagonists. I mean, there are, right? And that was the first time that they've ever done that. But really, when we talk about the characters, like the ability to switch between them at any time in combat and all stuff like that, like it was a huge level up in many areas. I think that paves the way for the series going forward.
Yeah, Xenoblade 3, it just felt so natural to really jump into and see this evolution. Because, 2 did push the series forward, but it also went in a bunch of different directions than 1 did. But 3 really does feel, I wouldn't say quite the perfect balance of like 1 and 2. It's definitely more 1 leaning for me in terms
Mm-hmm.
of especially area design.
Agreed.
But I'd say it's a pretty good balance. You even have the dual arts, and it's interesting to have arts that recharge in different ways. It's interesting to plan builds around. Or you can just plan a build where you just only use fusion arts and be lazy. I definitely never did that at all in the game. But it really is, I wouldn't say it's, like you said, it's a mishmash of the prior two main entries. But it's not cacophonous. It doesn't like, they're not at odds with each other. It's pretty harmonious, I'd say. And plus just all the extra quality of life and polish that's been added. Because the game, like, it runs great, it looks beautiful, and like, it's hard to explain just on a game feel level. Like, you can feel a little bit of jank in like Rex or Shulk's jump. Like, there's just some
Mm-hmm.
things like that have been polished out, or you're not getting like Xenoblade 1 ice physics. This really is like Monolith flexing what they can do, especially after they helped with a beast like Breath of the Wild. Like, they just keep pushing further and further. And Xenoblade 3, I think, marks like the end of like the past 20 years of development that Monolith has been doing. Like, it
Agreed.
really is like this great lead up and delivery.
Agreed. Yeah, I think that's the thing that stuck out to me, like looking back on this game, is that I know this is not something that people debate on, but the whole idea of like the Klaus saga, right? And like, oh, we're done, we're done, we're moving on. I feel like a lot of people have made assumptions and stuff. Like, this is definitely Xenoblade 3 is like the closing of a chapter, but I also feel like in the same breath it's the opening of a new one. Um, and I feel like a lot of people are so quick to write off like what this game established and did for the future of the series. And yeah, I mean, I think, when you're talking about the design philosophies of it, I agree with you. I think I definitely would lean more towards Xenoblade 1 in multiple areas. But again, like, this is still kind of a marriage between those two games. I mean, that's seen in the battle system where, we have people from one nation in Kevez that have the time cooldown arts, but then in Agnes, they are all auto attack cooldown. And it's like the just it's so unique how they managed to pit everything. And you notice, okay, the people who have like ether lines and look like blades from Agnes don't have accents. They sound American, right? It's very interesting just seeing how much work went into the design to pull a game like this off. And I think obviously those small details are what really help make the game very memorable.
And man, 2 does this really well also, but gosh, just like all the extra quest stuff in 3, like that really will be the majority of your playtime if you play games like Noah and I, of course, trying to do as much as possible. But there's just so much to this world. Like they explain so much. You'll go into a quest line in one part of the world and you're gonna hear like the history of certain NPCs, some of the like, heroes and main characters that get added into like, not quite the main cast, but like the side cast.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's just so much writing. There's a lot of
Yes.
it. And it's different from 2 because a lot of 2s surrounds like, you still get all the juicy lore of each Titan you're on, but a lot of it is the Blade quest, and it's more about building a personal relationship with the Blades. But I guess this leans more into like, Xenoblade 3 still leaning more towards 1, which I'd say that'd be the only complaint you and I could have about 3 in terms of like the 1 and 2 mixing, is that there should have been a bit more 2 like design philosophy in it. But
Yeah.
we also know that 2, for some strange reason, is a contentious entry, and I do think it's clear that Monolith dialed a few things back. Like, I was really happy we had Saito back on character design, but he did go in a different direction, which I'm not knocking. It's great and fits like the tone of Xenoblade 3 pretty much perfectly. Plus, just God, he just makes sick designs.
Yeah, his designs are great, but again, I think that they perfectly fit the game, but they're definitely more restrained than they were in Xenoblade 2, and that's not a bad thing. But like, I think you and I both agree, like, I personally, and I know that this is something that some people disagree with. I think that Saito's ability to design the characters of this series has been incredibly impactful in making memorable characters, and that's not a knock on Monolith's internal art team. Like, they designed Juniper and a couple of the other heroes. Many of the heroes actually were all almost designed by Monolith instead of Saito, which, his contribution was mainly just main characters and prominent characters. But I know, like, going forward, if Saito is to remain the character designer of the series, I definitely would love to see him go more into very I want to say polarizing design, in a sense of just very eye-catching stuff that, very recognizable and unique. Because, not saying that I think that there are incredible details. Like, what I love about his design for like Mio specifically is like, you see like all these different fabrics that he drew out in her design, and like her little gloves have all these different unique. It's just very intricate, and he cares. You can tell he really cares about the work that he puts in, and obviously, even beyond Xenoblade 3, he designed the characters for Future Redeemed, and all those character designs are incredible. And so whatever he works on is great, but I definitely agree with the sentiment that like it was definitely, I think a more mature approach to character design, which again fit the tone of the game. But I definitely want to see him get like, a little more unrestrained, I guess, for the next one if he does work on it.
Because I'd say like some of like Xenoblade 2's like extra sauce comes from how it leans into sci-fi specifically. Because it goes more that like high fantasy sci-fi that we'll see in other series like Phantasy Star or like certain animes and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But Xenoblade 3, like we've kind of been saying the past 10 minutes or so, definitely leans more into 1. Because 1 feels a bit more classic JRPG in terms of some of its designs. Like
Right.
it has some more like revealing extra armors and stuff, but that's pretty typical of the genre. And I'm not saying anything about like Xenoblade 1's character design. I think they're all solid, but I think some of it I think 2's just like the sauciest the designs have been for Xenoblade. Like they're just the best. They have a lot of good color, and just because of that setting, a lot of the blades and stuff might be humanoid, but they'll have like other flair. Like, there's I can't quite remember her name off the top of my head, but she's more like a porcelain doll.
Mm-hmm.
Plus all the different styles.
Yeah. And I, I will say, like, the thing that I do appreciate the most about Xenoblade Three's character design is the fact that, Saito managed to interweave like so many different, like I said, intricate details on clothing, but like, you have even different like races and different kinds of characters mixed in, right? It's like the fact that, Mio is, Noah and Nia's daughter, right? Or no, Noah, I'm getting confused here. Mio is Rex and Nia's daughter, right? Like the details on her eyes being gold and stuff like that, or lands being, clearly having, machina descent and stuff like that. Like that the detailing that went in there, I think is really great. And again, I was very happy with the characters and the designs themselves. But I think, even beyond the designs, like we kind of mentioned earlier, the writing is where it really shines. And, like
Truly.
I loved I loved Xenoblade 2 character writing so much, but I definitely, I'm not gonna shy away from the fact that like the character writing in 3 for the main 6 characters was the best of the series.
Honestly, like, and they just, I think one of the like just stylistic things for me that sold me on some of the character writing in 3 really hard is when they, combine and have these Ouroboros moments where they see each other's minds and stuff. Like,
Yep.
and just, it almost feels like obviously there's things like Heart to Hearts and some of the campfire chats and stuff carried over from Torna, which all that is great supplemental writing, but it honestly feels like Heart to Hearts in a sense were injected into the main story between the main characters. It feels like a lot of the stuff, like in Xenoblade 1, for example, I feel some of the main cast outside of like Shulk can fall a little flat if you don't chase some of those extra heart to hearts. Because there's
Yep.
just things you won't know or understand or feel about these characters that the main plot just kind of doesn't dig into or really show you. But that's not really an issue in Xenoblade 3 because they all have their moments, they all have their relationships with each other, and it's just a very interesting web that grows and changes, especially since they start the game with them on, opposing sides. So
Mm-hmm.
it's just interesting dynamics just through and through, and then they're well written and well bridged. Like everything makes perfect sense, and then like all the world quest stuff I think just grounds everything. I think this is one of the better senses of like society and history you get in a Xenoblade game.
Agreed, for sure. I those are important aspects, and yeah, I definitely think that like you said, the character writing this time is really just interwoven in the main story. Like it's not an optional thing, and the optional stuff that is there only expands on that, which is great. But no, I would love to dive into this kind of society stuff because this is a very important point for me. Like the world of Xenoblade 3 is very unique, right? It's very unique in the sense that it is literally the world of Xenoblade 1 and 2 collided together and frozen in time, which is just a crazy thought. And I think that they did it really well, making this world that was interesting. And I will say, the one problem I have with Xenoblade 3's world is I just feel like there aren't very many memorable locations. And the reason I think that I feel that way, not a knock on the music, which the music is incredible, but the music tracks themselves are not as memorable as those in 1 and 2. And the reason for that is because they went for more of an atmospheric approach. Like I could sit here and hum every single theme of Xenoblade 1 and 2. Xenoblade 3, I could probably hum about half of them, you know? And so I think that music obviously is a key part of telling the story. The atmospheric element, I think, definitely made the locations a little less memorable. But there are still incredible locations in this game, and I love, I definitely think that there are good, good areas to explore. And with the society aspect, like, yeah, it's really interesting when you start to get what is essentially a shadow government, right? And gets that Xenogears cog turning. and being the Mobius, and kind of just seeing how these, society just accepts it and operates. It's very fascinating, and like they really did so much detailing for like, having commanders, and then having, Ferranuses, and then having this and having that. It's very interesting on how, they were able to create this world that, is frozen in time and shouldn't exist at all, be interesting. Which sure, you could say, oh, it's just Xenoblade 1 and 2 worlds, you can make it interesting. I don't think you can. I think that, it definitely takes skill and craft to be able to make a world in a game like this very interesting. But they definitely did that because there was just so much to see and discover. And I just, being a fan of the first two games, I wanted to know everything about why and how this world got to be the way it was.
And it's just interesting because while these are technically in a sense reused worlds, in the in like the scope of the actual main plot and what's affecting the characters, that stuff is just basically set dressing. Like Xenoblade 3 accomplishes to reuse the old but make like an entirely new lore. Because the main pertinent stuff is this frozen in time stuff with the Mobius. And then you have the city moving as like another third, or well, I guess rather fourth or fifth faction in the, mix. So there's a lot going on, and stuff has been, paired together so well that it also just feels like a new world. And I think you're kind of right. I think Xenoblade 3 does kind of fall a bit flat in a couple areas. None of it's bad, mind you, whatsoever. It's
No.
it's really well crafted, but I think that is just like a byproduct of like the level of polish it achieved. That's kind of how I feel, because some of it is, they did a few takebacks on some stuff in Xenoblade 2, like people had issues with the navigating, but Xenoblade 2 is also very vertical and dense with a lot of like interior stuff to deal with. So unless you're like actually paying attention and exploring, you know, that's going to give your average Joe issues, especially since most open world games are, big field with a marker somewhere.
Right. No, yeah. And I mean, the world, again, I say that there aren't very, like recognizably memorable locations. Like, in the, I think, like, okay, Gower Plain in Xenoblade 1, or Satoru Marsh, or in Xenoblade 2, Araya, or Tantal. Like, there's a lot of areas I think I'm like, oh man, yeah, like get a little nostalgia away from that. And I don't necessarily have that with Xenoblade 3, but the world itself, like, is still it's really cool to traverse. My favorite area by far in the game was Swordmark and the city, right?
Oh
Those are
yeah.
great. And I mean, Origin's really cool too.
Also
But
liked the where it combines like the forest with Mortha, like
yeah,
Machina and
yeah,
Mortha. Like that's a cool fusion. That's very
yeah,
inspired.
100%. And that was the really cool thing about this kind of world that they put together is like they kind of went and they're like, all right, we're gonna make original locations, but we're gonna be like, okay, we're taking this element and this element from Xenoblade 1 and Xenoblade 2 locations, and we're throwing them together and making an entirely new one. And it's really cool. Like, yeah, the Mactha Forest, I think it's called. That one is awesome. You take the Magna Woods from Xenoblade 1, and you take the, Moritha, which is this, old timey, former human civilization, sci-fi esque area in Xenoblade 2. Just incredible. And you combine those together and make something really, really cool. And you saw that a lot just in exploring the different areas. Like, you saw bits of Aerith Sea in in the area with the boat. And it's just very interesting to see kind of where their design philosophy extended of, how we're going to combine two locations. And they definitely had some pairings I wasn't expecting either.
Yeah, it's just hard to explain. I think I've seen someone try to offer like this one explanation for why three's areas kind of feel the way they do, and I might be inclined to agree. So like in Xenoblade 1 and 2, you actually travel between, loading gates and stuff to get, between the Titans or like parts of the Bionis or Mechanus. And
Uh-huh.
that is like a level of video game abstraction of like traveling in a sense. But 3, like each area is like a big a- like a big super area, you know, where it's like here's this one area and then like you'll go through like a cave or something and be in like the next themed area where you'll go from like a desert or whatever to like the ocean or something. That's an improper pairing. I'm just giving offering the example, but you know it's these big three. So it's like combining 3 Xenoblade One areas into one big super area, and I can kind of see where this is coming from. But I just feel like some of it comes from even if you had a big open thing in like Xenoblade Two, like like the Cliffs of Moratha, like you'll have like a small side area or something that has nothing that's purely there for the story, or even if there's a big
Mm-hmm.
field you'll go over and now there's like woods and like intricate things to travel through or up, or there's a factory or something in the mountains. I just feel like Xenoblade 3 didn't have enough of that. Like it still had some of it, like you'll go and find like this cave, there's like kind of like a little building area or something, but it mostly did feel more like an MMO, where it is just like a big, beautiful area with a few interesting things, and
Yeah.
it just it's just difficult to explain because like you look at it and it's like it's artistically amazing, like the new shaders and stuff they've made for 3 over 2 are really awesome. Like their art direction's still great. They have really inspired, picks for their combinations of areas. And it's honestly just impressive to have like near instant loads to skip travel between, these clusters of huge, just fairly interesting areas. But it is just missing that some X factor that I can't quite put my finger on.
Yeah, and again, I think it's important to stress that like the world that they were able to design was still very very, very interesting, right? Like it still had a lot to offer.
It's nothing short
And
of impressive, truly.
yes, 100%. And I'm definitely like, I'm really excited to see kind of how they implement this philosophy that they learned from this game in the future. Because to me, it feels like that there is a lot of potential to take the designs and the world in Xenoblade 3 and make them even further. And I think part of that's going to definitely be learning from the different areas that they were able to create. And I don't want to say like, oh, go back, but like, I do think the open world clearly had presented challenges of, properly fleshing out an environment and still keeping it engaging. And I think that for Monolith, I have no doubt they'll be able to do it. And to be honest, I feel like the Future Redeemed, I felt much better about those areas than I did in a lot, not all, but a lot of the areas in Xenoblade 3. And I think part of that is part of that it might be just my nostalgia talking of like how, I remember when this game got announced, like I was expecting it to be this whole like, you know, we're gonna see all the casts again, and we're gonna have see all the cast of characters from the first 2 games. We're gonna go and have this whole mission, and it's gonna be this huge send off for all these characters, and we're gonna move forward. And it wasn't that. And I mean, I completely understand it. They try to make every Xenoblade game be standalone in a way of, not having to force people to play through all entries of the series to be able to jump in. And I think that's a great thing. But I also, like in retrospect, I'm really glad that they decided to go the route they did, because even in the cast of characters, right? Like take Mio, right? Like that is still that she is literally the legacy of main characters in Xenoblade 2. And it's like, I think that it's great that they were able to, display that through the way that they did. But I'm very happy that they went the route they did and gave us 6 more amazing characters in the series instead of just using, the ones that we already knew.
Yeah, I just think that was truly the way to go. And I honestly do not think the story that they went with could have properly been told with the old characters.
No, no way.
It's like honestly, it'd be honestly just the story would have gone completely different with if this was like Shulk and Rex going about it, but they kind of explain that with the DLC. But
Right.
I think that's really the next like nibbling point I want to get into. Like we've talked about some of like the systems and like the world and the writing, but I think us just really diving into like more of the like plot and character stuff that really spoke to us or we thought was particularly amazing. I think that's the direction we should go.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's great.
Like first off, I just got to say, like I'm pretty sure Noah and I could search our hundreds of thousands of DMs and find it somewhere. But there's like just one night I was like, man, Xenoblade cutscenes really do punch above their weight because these aren't like these big AAA games. They don't even have Zelda money behind them. But
No.
man, some of the action and some of the impressive things you'll see in some of like the cutscenes, it's just so well done. Like lots of animation, like man, and some of the like especially just chapter 5, some of the face shots and the way they do the faces and like the voice acting and just the direction, just they're so good at making a scene hit you in the feels or make you excited or even maybe make you angry at some villains. It's just man, even other RPGs and such in the same like budget and release category as Xenoblade don't do it nearly as well. Like you can look at an Atelier cutscene and I love those games, but you can tell it's like while they use like even the same canned animations for like just casual whatevers in like main cutscenes when they're talking, which Xenoblade doesn't really do that in the big cutscenes.
No. And, I think one of the things with the cutscenes that's so great is like all the cinematography, like you mentioned it briefly, but like I always look at like this, and this is something that has been that way since the beginning. There's just been a very, very great minds working on these games and developing these action cutscenes with just incredible cinematography. But, Xenoblade 3, you especially see it. Like, I think back to that fight in Chapter 1 with, Agnes versus Kevez, and it's Noah and Mio going at it, and just the angles that they take with that while it's so fluid, and it just makes you sit there and be like, wow. Like, I mean, that looks like a cutscene out of, the 7 Remake series. Like, I mean, it's crazy.
Like
And it's
truly.
like, that is like the upper echelon of like, what I think video game cutscenes can be, and like Death Stranding 2, stuff like that. But, when you take it Xenoblade and you look at those action cutscenes and just the incredible cinematography that they have, I mean, it's hard not to sit there and just be, I don't want to say inspired, but just like taken aback of like just how very impressive it is that they were able to pull that off in this game. And, we mentioned it earlier, but like Xenoblade 3 specifically introduced a brand new shader model, and, it did wonderful things for the way that this game is rendered. Xenoblade 2, most of the rendering on the characters is not, I would say mostly flat. And Xenoblade 3 has a very unique kind of, 3D-esque feel to it, because of the way that it's rendered. And I'm very, very curious to see like what the next game looks like, because to me it feels like that can be taken even further and evolved. And I know that some people are whatever about it, but I think that, Xenoblade has always been, Xeno in general has always been anime, right? In a way, anime inspired, visually. And I think that leaning into that, obviously you had Saito, who had, Xenoblade 2, just very, very animation inspired designs. With Xenoblade 3, you still had that, but we got a little more, a little more realistic, a little more detailed here and there, on facial structure. And I think leaning into that and leaning into the idea that, we can continue the path forward for this, like, animated almost look, I think is a great way to go. And I know that there's people that disagree with that, but I'm sorry, like that is Xeno has always been, anime inspired. Like look at Cosmos. Just saying, look at anything from Xenosaga, look at anything from Xenogears. It's always been that way, and so I really want to see it continue to dig and just clench its claws into that ideology of visual design as we go forward. And I think that the shader model is incredible in 3, and there's so much that they could do going forward to elevate that further.
Yeah, like obviously some of it is just 2 is built on older tech and they use just, much more simpler like shading methods. Like it still achieves this bright, colorful anime look that's great. But 3, I'd almost describe it as like looking at like an anime cell versus like looking at a manga page. Cause like 3, like that shader and the texturing leaves like, I wouldn't quite call it watercolor, but almost like a brushstroke effect. And it's like
Right.
really awesome for like the eyes. And they've just stepped their game up with not only, these shaders and texturing techniques, but man, like the facial animation in this game, and they're being way less afraid to have these shots that get up close and personal to these faces, almost like a Final Fantasy game, where it's like, man, like, yeah, you can look at like Noah's hands or something and see that there's not a billion polygons in his fingers or something, but this art style they're going not only allows them to make like a beautiful, like breathtaking world where you can have great cinematography and actually display the emotions and actions you need in a scene, but it's hard to tear your eyes away from. Like there's just so much depth to it.
Right.
And it just makes you feel grounded in a world when everything just kind of sings together like that.
Agreed. And I want to go back to the story stuff we're talking about, because I know that I definitely got us on a tangent. I apologize, but with everything that you've said, and we're talking about these visuals, like yes, the emotional moments in the story hit so hard because of how they're animated, and I think about like obviously chapter 5 is like that big culminating sequence of like Mio, quote unquote, dying right at the end of the game or at the end of the chapter. And, that's a whole, the way that that's animated is just beautifully done. But I even think that, like, while that's obviously the obvious one, the smaller moments are just as well animated. And I think that's the thing that, like, elevates the experience even though you don't realize it, is those small animations and like the face and stuff is like a characters being surprised or angry or this or that. Like that's the kind of stuff that really elevates the experience even though you don't realize that. And for me, like I think about the fight in with it on the waterfall when uh Santa and Lands use Ouroboros and stuff like that, or even like just any of the major fights, and just like seeing the characters react the way they do, or even just talking around the campfire about like the state of the world, or Mio, the fact that she is almost out of time, stuff like that. Just it's very immersive in that way, and really helps pull you into the story and make you care about the characters more.
Yeah, just everything just sings. And there's also been like slight new additions that are interesting. Like, you'd get interesting like post battle quotes and stuff in Xenoblade 1 and 2. But one thing I noticed right off the bat when playing 3 is that they actually put subtitles on the screen and have characters talk about things when you're walking between, objectives or areas that are like
Yes.
story relevant. And that's awesome. That's just really Xenoblade 3 is just has so much writing where it needs to be. Like it's just hard to explain. Like I'm sure Noah and I could sit here and like just unload some grievances on Xenoblade 3, but really the thing about Xenoblade 3 is that even if I have an issue with something, it's like, but man, literally everything else is so well done, so well bolstered, and there's just so much. it's and even in the story cutscenes and stuff, like you were talking about the cinematography, I love how they really, really nailed this time around, like the sense of scale in some scenes. Like
Mm-hmm.
when Tyon and Yudi have like the Ouroboros form where they pick up that one Piranus in like chapter 4, I think. Like that's just a huge area where this big mech is just hidden and it's filled with water, and like it uses like camera angles and a bunch of well done cuts and stuff, and it just gives you this sense of like, man, it's an accomplishment that this Ouroboros picked this thing up and prevented like a disaster. Or like the ending sequence, all that stuff when it's cutting between like the multiple party stuff and then like Melia's mech. Like
Yeah,
that.
no, those are all amazing sequences, and it's like, I think that this is regardless of, regardless of any issues one might have with Xenoblade 3, this is by far, in a way, the most complete and the best game that Monolith has put together ever. And, like for me, it's not my favorite Xenoblade game, but I can't, I won't sit here and tell you that it's not the best well-rounded package, because it is. Everything hits on all cylinders, and I mean, I story-wise, like the entire like last part of the game is just incredible, right? Like from the M switch out and N's meltdown to the queens coming out and actually turning the castles into mechs and fighting in Origin. Like the euphoria I got from Nia and Melia, spawning into the battle, the final battle, like unmatched, dude. Unmatched.
Just, man. And we said this earlier, like all the side content just bolsters the main story. Like there's things that are mentioned in the main story that, aren't relevant to like continuing the plot, but it's like something will be mentioned and you can, honest to God, go find like this colony or this character and just learn a lot. And man, some of the hero quest lines are so great. What's that one girl's name, Fiona, where it's like that colony surrounded with a bunch of flowers and all that?
Yeah, yeah.
Like that's like a colony that skews of a lot of younger people, and it's just interesting to see how like these teenagers, like compared to like Noah's group where they're all like 19. It's interesting to see how the younger people in this world get by, because everyone's part of this cycle of war that they just quite literally cannot escape.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting to see like, oh well, this colony is like a bunch of younger people, and honestly they don't do too much stuff unless they're like directly commanded. They're a lot more carefree, but then when you see what happens when things get serious or things go wrong, and you just kind of help them out and guide them through it. And what was cool about that is that it was actually Lons that stepped up, kind of almost had like a big bro moment, or like he giving off some unk energy helping these kids out. But like there's just so many colonies, like legitimately just one side content may be like, oh, there's colony alpha or beta or whatever, and it's like, oh well, that might not play a role in the main story, but you can go there and there's like a hero, there might be some unique quests and monsters over there. It just, everything is so well tied together, which like in Xenoblade 1 a lot of the quest stuff was like, well, here's some lore because it's like a rare, like a hard to get to area, or like there's a lot of Xenoblade 1's quest stuff revolved around like the community aspect of you helping NPCs,
Mm-hmm.
which is nice and fleshes out like the communities and how these people live, and you almost get to see some soap opera-esque interpersonal drama. So it's fun in that way, but it is still somewhat disconnected, except for like, rebuilding Colony 6. And Xenoblade 2 is more learning about these individual blades, but 3 really is, well, all this is just, it takes the best of both worlds of 1 and two's questing systems. Because it's you're learning about individual people that might not be pertinent to the main story, but they're written to where they like explore a new part or facet of the world or like other characters.
Yeah, and we talk about taking the best elements of Xenoblade 1 and 2 to put them into 3. I also think you have to look at like the thematic messaging of the game too, right? It almost takes the themes of both Xenoblade 1 and 2 and puts them together. And basically, we have basically a message saying that like regardless of what happens in the future, you have to move forward. And like, that takes the best messages from Xenoblade 1 of the, you can control your future, right? Other people don't have to decide it for you. And then Xenoblade 2 being, the message of life that it is, and that like, moving on and finding a way forward, right? And combining those together, I think are great. It's really great. And I think that the way that they were able to depict, like the idea and the concept of like, the being in this like endless now cycle is just torture in a way, right? Like I think the way that they were able to convey that with the clones and Mobius was phenomenal. And like, just it's a great message for people to have that like regardless of, what today is, like there's a better tomorrow waiting.
Like, you're so right. It really is just this build up from Xenoblade 1, 2, and 3 that like so I worked at like a hospital or whatever when like 3 came out. After I finished Xenoblade 3, like the next day at work I was just, skirting doing something and just texting one of my buddies like saying Xenoblade 3 might be the best gaming trilogy I've played. Xenoblade 3. The Xenoblade trilogy may be one of the best trilogies in gaming that I've played. Cuz it just has
100%.
it has such a good thematic build up. Every single game has such unique concepts and goes about exploring its themes and world differently while still feeling like Xenoblade. And just that fusion of fantasy and sci-fi is just so interesting. And then man, every game just really delivers on some amazing characters or themes. It's just and 3 caps it off. Three really is what made me like solidified in my brain and delivered this like really amazing trilogy onto us. Cause 3 at the end, it even has a bittersweet ending that most things just cannot pull that type of thing off, but Xenoblade 3 does. Cause it is so future forward looking that it's like things may not be how we want them now. Things may not be perfect, but you can work towards it. Because it really is. One is basically learning you can control your future. That's basically Shulk's whole arc. He even deals with at the start of the game of having trouble telling people these visions, out of fear, this fear of the future. And Xenoblade 2 continues that because there's pretty much every character in the main cast has some hang up from their past that's preventing them from, getting the future they want. It's keeping them trapped. And Xenoblade 3 is about, hey, you cannot let any of that, so it continues that stuff from 2 of you can't hang on to these things if they're not making you happy and if they're not the future you desire. You can't be stuck in this
Right.
now, this continuous, just like avoidance in a sense. You have to reach out and get what you want, even if it leads to, some bittersweetness along the way, which 3 has a lot of that. And it just
Yeah.
thematically just ties things up.
Yeah, no, it does. And I mean, I look at Xenoblade 3. I think the funniest thing that I see people say and complain about this game at times is like, oh, but it never happened. It never happened because of the time, technically. But it's like, it's so dumb. Because I think like the message of that game at the end, that last cutscene is amazing because it's like you see, time reset from the very first cutscene of the game, right? Whenever we see the clock stop, it resumes, except this time it goes forward. You see Noah running around, but he disappears after hearing the flute melody, and it's not just it's him and Mio's flute melody. And so I think it's just the message of saying that, like, you know, take Noah and Mio, right? Like two people who were clearly in love, that like their, future is still ahead of them, and that they're not, by making the decision to, restart the flow of time and lose what they have in the present, that doesn't mean that they're not going to be able to find each other again, once time restarts. And it's just stuff like that scattered throughout the whole game. I mean, just the way that they were able to display, character relations between each of the kind of Ouroboros pairs was incredible. And, I really do think that, Xenoblade 3 is probably the best RPG on the Switch in terms of just comprehensive complete package. It's probably the best RPG on the Switch, and I definitely think it's one of the best that we've had in the last decade. I mean, I'd put it up there with anything else in terms of, its ability to convey a meaningful story that's memorable, obviously incredibly well done soundtrack, great voice acting, interesting world, great characters, and then the combat, right? I mean, the combat, now granted, definitely gotta like chain attacks and hopefully like the chain attack music. But the combat's amazing, and you just put all that together and you get a package that's just really well executed and a lot of fun to play. And I think that's all you can ask for in an RPG. And with, as we talked about at the beginning of this episode, like talking about the fact that there's hours and hours and hours and hours of content waiting to be discovered, is just an awesome thing, because you can, if you want to just play the main story, you can do that and have an amazing experience. But if you want to explore every inch of the world, you're going to be rewarded for doing so, which is great.
And that's something the Xenoblade series delivers on so hard compared to a bunch of open world or pseudo open world games. Especially in 3, just really, really delivers on that. Like, there were times where I was more obsessed with the side content than the main story. And that's not a knock. Main story's great, but it's like, holy cow. How many games can you honestly play and say that even if there's like moments of quietude and you're not doing much, that at the end of the tunnel that there's honestly something cool to engage with? Be it like some type of fight, like a new class. I don't even think we've really talked about the class system yet, but
No.
that's really, you just feel rewarded for everything you do. And especially if you're someone who actually loves and cares about like storytelling, you're gonna get a lot out of doing the side content. It's hard to explain how much text is in this game. And
Yeah.
that really is the vehicle that delivers you everything in this game. Everything feels connected, everything feels grounded into this world, and you don't always get that. And I think that really is something that, like Noah said, makes it quite possibly the best RPG on the Switch.
100%. So I feel like we've said, oh, we haven't talked about that enough. Like, we got to dive into the gameplay. Like, we have to. So, one of the big things that we kind of briefly mentioned was they had this idea of combining the combat systems of both Xenoblade 1 and 2 together. And that sounds insane, but it works so well, like when you see everything.
Yeah, and especially when we start digging into like the class system, having like the two different types of arts, and then like certain classes align with, certain of one of the two kingdoms of Kaves or Agnes. So you can really get some crazy, like, you could hop on YouTube right now and see some insane chain attack output that people can do just from combining these arts in specific ways and setting up the proper chain attack. And then with the right class combinations, you get these better, chain attack bonuses. Like,
Hmm.
there's a lot of planning. And then having these two separate, disparate ways to charge arts, with the auto attack ones and the time based ones, you can really set yourself up to any playstyle you want. I feel like the auto attack ones are a bit faster paced. So, like, if you have certain classes that you enjoy playing that way, you could, if you want, you could just go full on, well, here's my Agnian party member. I'll slap an Agnian class on them, and almost all their arts are going to be these auto attack filled arts. And you can really set up something more fast paced if that's how you prefer playing. But as Noah mentioned earlier, there's also character switching. So you can really just. I'm the type of person who I kind of played as Noah most of the time in the game. I usually just try to master the main character. But you can really just on the fly have whatever you want at your fingertips. And you can get really granular, which that's just a good feeling in an RPG when you're like concocting like a plan. Like, maybe there's a boss, maybe there's a unique monster, or maybe there's just something you want to try out. And you're just sitting in these menus and running these numbers, and then test something out, and boom, gold. And Xenoblade 3's battle system has a level of intuitiveness that 1 and 2 don't have. Because I feel like, unless you get a PhD, you're going to have trouble with some of the chain attacks in 1, and especially 2. And 3's simplification of that mechanic, I think, makes the combat so much more intuitive.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, the big thing for me with Xenoblade 3 is like the ability to switch between characters and assign them literally any class in the game is unbelievably huge. Like, just sitting there and being able to just fine tune and customize every aspect of gameplay to how you want it to be was great. I mean, if you want to have, 6 characters that all have the same exact class as Noah, you can. I mean, you can do whatever you want, and I think that's great.
And also, just there's when you're in the field and you get like a decision to help like a side, there's just interesting little things like that where you what is it, there's like certain points or tokens that you get depending on like the split second decisions you make when selecting one of those battles.
Yeah, and I mean, when we talk about progression and we talk about like, oh yeah, there's all these hours of content in the game. Part of that for me was like, being able to rank up every single one of the classes and level them up to max for every character. And like that's a ton of fun, and you can switch between and try different play styles. And I think when we look at RPGs a lot of the time, and don't get me wrong, these are all amazing games, if not masterpieces, right? But like take for example, right, games without class systems that work well. I'm gonna use Final Fantasy series in general, right? Like the more recent ones, right? There's not class systems per se, and job system is a thing of the past there, but they do it really well. But with Xenoblade 3, it's like, no, we're gonna give you that really great experience of combat and gameplay, but we're gonna dial it up and allow you to customize it to play your way, the way that you want to. And I think that element is going to be really interesting to see how it evolves going forward, because I think that considering this was kind of its debut in Xenoblade 3, because I guess you could call blades customizable, which yes they are, and you could change weapons and stuff, but full-on classes is definitely a step up from that. So I'm curious to see how this evolves in the future.
And
But
then
it was just a really
there's the
great
class
way.
system in X, but like
Hmm.
really The class system in X is like what? Like 5 or 6 times smaller than 3's? Because
Yeah.
3 has so many classes. And then X's kind of fall into like archetypes. There's really only 3 trees on that. So I was honestly blown away by the 3 class system just being as dense as it is.
I know, right?
And really, that's like one of the hallmarks of Xenoblade 3's combat system compared to 1 or 2. Because like you have like the skill trees that you can swap between in 1 that technically offer some playstyle change, but ultimately a lot of those skills just pour back into, well, Shulk's like a DPS glass cannon, Ryan's the tank, so it doesn't really have much customizability. It just adds a little more utility to a role. And then 2, had the customizable like blade loadouts and stuff. But that's not really a class system because it's like everyone's like a multi-tool that you just kind of customize. But having
Mm-hmm.
this actual rigid class system and you can mix and match arts like later on, right?
Yeah, yeah, you can change
Because
arts and customize it however you want.
yeah, so it just really you can end up not even loving a class but loving an art and just being like, I might actually use that with something else. Or have like this character, supplement that. Which just having the bigger party in general in 3, well, it makes me think of 2 things. One, that expands your strategy and builds so much having 6 party members. You can really prepare yourself for anything, or just make your whole party suited for fighting like one guy. And you can't really get that in like Xenoblade 1 or even 2, because 2, like, it's not like you can have multiple of the same rare blade on people, like if you needed it for something. But and then what? 3 also has like the cooking stuff and the gyms.
Yeah,
So that's
yeah,
just
yeah. I mean, you've got if you get bored with the 26 classes in the game, there is plenty of other stuff to do.
and that's just really where we keep coming back to. We'll talk on like one aspect of Xenoblade 3 and be like, but oh, that connects to this other aspect, and then it's this absurdly deep thing that connects to other things. That's that's just the kind of game Xenoblade 3 is. There's just so much game. It's Monolith's Final Fantasy VII Rebirth.
Yeah, it's a packed game, and as we close things out, obviously Xenoblade 3 was made even better by its expansion, Future Redeemed, which added on to the story and gave new perspective to a bunch of events. But really, as a standalone RPG experience, I definitely really look back fondly on Xenoblade 3 and think it did a phenomenal job, closing out that first Xenoblade trilogy, narratively, right? I mean, we got answers to stuff, but more importantly, just beyond just plot points. Like I think thematically, as we talked about, that's more important, and it does a great job of continuing on that message and closing it out for the future. But as we sit here 3 years later, I think the one thing that stuck with me the most is definitely beyond the themes, just the journey that was Xenoblade 3, right? And going through the loop of the game and traversing this entire world, knowing that you have this very limited time before your life is just over. And I think it's a very very fascinating premise that was executed so wonderfully, and I'm definitely hoping we get a Nintendo Switch 2 upgrade for it at some point.
Please. But man, Xenoblade 3 is one of the few games that's actually made me like weep, just cry.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes a lot for something like a movie or a game to really elicit that type of response out of me, but Xenoblade 3 did it. It's also one of those like few games where once I did practically everything, sometimes you just get like this melancholy, like, man, I've kind of seen everything. And it's kind of sad,
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely bittersweet, right? Of like, looking at when you beat a game like that that has been such a emotional and impactful experience, and just kind of knowing that, you know, everything there is, you've experienced everything. But I think the thing that I love about Xenoblade 3 is the message of, continuing on and stuff, and, you know, moving forward and not getting stuck in the endless now is like a reminder almost that, like, this is a vessel to use to help guide your future experiences in a way, right? It's like, regardless of whether or not that the game is over or not, like, the memories and the roads it paved for you, or what you took away from it, that lasts forever. And I think that, that is truly art in the medium, that is able to implicit and impact feelings on you as an individual that, last longer than just for the length of the game that you view it, right? Like, if you think about, I think about games that I still think about today, like Xenoblade 3 is one of them. And, like, to me, that's the sign of, a work of art in the medium.
Yeah, just because sometimes you just sit and play a game or watch a movie, and even if you think about it in passing, like, you might not get like that almost like bump in your chest, or like that curl in your stomach, or just like when you feel like nostalgia in your brain from just thinking about something that truly impacted you and something that really brought you joy. And Xenoblade 3, well, the Xenoblade series in general, has brought me a lot of that, but 3 has its own unique moments and just ways it handles things that leave a different impact on me than Xenoblade 1 or 2. And it really has rocketed up into games that I think about a lot, like Final Fantasy VII, Death Stranding, or
Yeah, yeah.
like it. It truly is just something special, even if it has like a flaw here or there. But it's such a complete, thorough package that, man, it's just, even if there's things you don't like, it's just really hard to not just give it a thumbs up.
100%. I mean, I definitely don't think that you're ever gonna find a game that is perfect or you have zero issues with. Like, there's always something. But again, like, the thing that I love about Xenoblade 3 the most is, like, even with, the select things that I felt could have been better in the game, it is so authentic that it's hard to not just sit back and appreciate what we got, right? Because it is truly just an authentic through and through experience that, at the end of the day, I think is not only a reflection of, the Xenoblade series, but a reflection of, like, Takahashi's entire career. And, you can even look at the endless now being a metaphor for, what we talked about briefly earlier about these ideas that he keeps coming back to, right? And in a way, like, you can view Xenoblade 3 as a metaphor of, Takahashi and, Monolith moving forward from the past and looking towards the future. And, at the end of the day, we'll have to wait and see what awaits in the future for Monolith, but I'm incredibly excited because I know, regardless of what it is, it will be just as impactful and memorable as the 3 Xenoblade games have been. Or I guess 4. I'm sorry, X.
But really, it's the end of an era in the best of ways. And this is the type of game where it's not, when you finish it, you don't go, man, this is it. It's more like, man, this is it. Like, it's more like you're left with like a wanting of more, but an acceptance of that Xenoblade 3's done. And I'd say that's I say I have issues and stuff with this game, which I do, but they almost derive from, man, as much as there is in this game, I wish there was more in like the best of ways. It's not like a disappointing, I want more,
Right. Yeah.
And with the future, just calling towards us, we will get more, and it may not be what we ask for always, but I think it will always be something we can work with and appreciate.
100%. Yeah. And I mean, we've had, we put out a kind of first predictions video for what we think Xenoblade 4, if that's what it's called, is going to be covering. And maybe they just don't do that and they just go and say, what, we're going to go and make a direct sequel to X. I'm like, that's great either way. But I totally am in agreement. Like, regardless of what comes next, like, this is something that, the Xenoblade fan base as a whole should be excited for. And, I think that the lessons from Xenoblade 3 about the endless now and, stuff like that, I think that is really relevant in terms of, looking to, regardless of what, the next game looks like, it's something that I think we should, embrace and be excited for. But, 3 years later, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is still a brilliant game. And if you somehow listened to this the whole way and you haven't played it, hopefully this gave you the push you needed. So, with that being said, that's going to conclude episode 15 of Beyond the Conduit. Be sure to let us know down below, what you thought of Xenoblade 3. When did you play the game? What were your favorite moments or elements of the story? And with that being said, thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.